It's okay. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today on leadership in the era of COVID-19. I'm just going to give everybody a few seconds to join and get situated. Just a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted, but you do have the ability to write in both the chat box and ask questions in the Q&A box. We ask that if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box because the chat can get a little congested. So we want to make sure we're seeing the questions that you're asking, so put it there. And if at certain points, we may ask people if they have feedback or comments or want to come on, and so you can raise your hand if you'd like to participate that way, and we can unmute you. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Lakeya and Jennifer to talk about this topic. Yeah, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, or afternoon, depending on which coast you're on. My name is Jennifer Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers, New Jersey and Delaware chapter, and I'm just so glad that you're able to join us today. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Lakeya Cherry from the Network for Social Work Managers. And if you'd like to just welcome everyone and maybe share a little bit about yourself and your experience. You've got a ton of experience working with remote teams, and just give everyone a little bit of perspective about your background, and we'll start there.
Awesome, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I'm Lakeya Cherry, and I'm the CEO of the Network for Social Work Management. This is a role that I've been in for about 6.5 years. And the majority of the time that I've been in this role, I've actually worked remotely. And so I now reside in California, but I previously lived in Washington, D.C. And the network is actually based in California. So many people don't know this, but the Network for Social Work Management has a team of 2 people. It's myself living in San Diego, California, and my administrative coordinator, Idalia, who lives in Los Angeles. And so I'm very familiar with remote work. I'm also a doctoral candidate at USC School of Social Work, and my DSW program is actually online as well. So the realities of today are very familiar for me because I'm used to remote work. So thanks again, Jennifer and NASW New Jersey / Delaware for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit about NASW, New Jersey, and Delaware and our experience with remote working. We are 2 chapters. New Jersey has a physical office located in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and Delaware also has a physical office in Wilmington, Delaware. We have not been working remotely as a team 100%, but like many of you in this country, the COVID-19 pandemic has really forced us to immediately move to 100% work remote. And so we are doing so out of our homes. And like many of you on the call are also working at homes with significant others and children. So I just want to acknowledge that if you see little children pop up in the background, that's the reality that many of us are facing. And my family often makes an appearance in some of our videos over the last few weeks. Working remotely is a new environment for all of us, and today we really wanted to talk to you about some of the best practices, things to think about as you're now navigating this new world, and what does leadership look like, and how does it look like to manage remote teams and create the infrastructure to make sure that we're moving our organizations forward, still meeting our goals, still doing the fundraising and offer member services, and all of the things that we know that you as macro social workers are doing, but just really forced to do so differently. There are a lot of things that we wanted to talk about today, and one of those things was systems and infrastructure. And I was wondering if you might want to talk a little bit about that to begin with, and then I will share some of the tools that we're using. Certainly infrastructure is really important, and making sure that your teams have the tools they need to continue to do their work, and there are a lot of things to consider in that space. So would you mind talking a little bit about your infrastructure and how you guys are navigating this as a team?
Yes, definitely. So one of the most important tools that we use is Google, so Google for nonprofits. And so our email system, everything is set up through Google. My admin and I, we every morning we say good morning through Google Hangouts. And so we utilize that chat function all day throughout our day. But we also utilize Google for the Google Documents, the Google Slides, as well as the different Google Excel spreadsheets. And so as we're collectively working on a project, designing a program, or thinking through something, we will literally meet through Google Docs and collectively work through that. Similar for when I'm working with my board of directors and we're having, for example, a board meeting or a board committee utilizing Zoom, we will share our screen and go into the Google Doc to actually show the agenda for the day, as well as some of the different Google documents, which indicate some of the different things that we're working on. We also utilize Slack. The Network for Social Work Management recently opened up its Slack account for some of our members who are feeling isolated and who want to connect and chat throughout the day. So that is something else that we use for kind of project management. We've utilized Basecamp. We've utilized Asana. These are all tools that nonprofits should be using and can use. And most of these product lines have a discount. For example, Google just released a survey yesterday asking nonprofits, what do they need? And what could Google basically do to help them, whether it's infrastructure support such as more laptops and computers, whether it's technological training with some of their tools. But a lot of these different tech companies, they have discounts for nonprofits. You could also go through companies such as TechSoup to register or apply for a discount to use Slack or some other things. We also use Dropbox a lot. I laugh with my assistant that Dropbox is basically our file management system. And so if you are going into an office, if you are a clinician, many people are still kind of printing out their case notes or what have you, putting it in a folder and filing it away. Our file management system is essentially Dropbox, where we have a ton of folders and everything we do is organized and coordinated through Dropbox. And that's something that we've used for a while. Obviously, there's privacy concerns, but we have everything kind of locked down to ensure privacy. And yeah, these are a few of the tools that have worked for us for a while.
Great, thank you. Our team does very similar stuff, and our team is a little bit larger, so I thought that I would share a little bit of our perspective and some of the tools and resources that we're using as well. I think phones is one of the biggest things that I hear about when people are thinking about how do we move to a work from home environment and how do we communicate with our constituencies in real time, but not giving out our cell phone numbers and our personal numbers. One of the things we did last year was transition to a voice over internet phone system. And that really has given our team the ability to be more nimble and to work from home remotely using our work phones. We have an app on our cell phones or on our desktop computers. So when people are calling our NASW offices, it's seamless. They're calling the office number, it's ringing to our computer or an app on our phone. And likewise, we can also make phone calls from our office number. It's sometimes a little fun to call people and people are like, you're still in the office right now. And we said, no, we just look like we're there, but isn't it great that you can still connect with us in this real time? And to that point, there are a lot of services now that are now opened up to the nonprofit and helping sector for free transition during this time. So RingCentral is the phone system that we use, and the video conferencing that we're doing today is through RingCentral. And a lot of the resources are available for free during the COVID crisis. So we'll make sure that we share that resource with you so that you can look for some of those services for your team if you're needing that. Certainly video conferencing is something that we feel really passionately about. We try to connect as much as we can as a team via video, whether it's for a morning meeting or a cup of coffee or just a quick touch base. I know that some of us are working at homes with children and families, but I know that a lot of teams, people are working at home alone, and that can feel incredibly isolating. And we want to make sure that we're seeing people and we're connecting, and also just connecting as a team to brainstorm together. There are a lot of great tools. Again, we use RingCentral, but we also have used GoToMeeting. There are a number of free ones out there. Shared drives and files is something that you mentioned. And for the teams that are out there who aren't using Google or are not able to because of the nature of their association, or for larger teams where that just might not be feasible, there's something called VPN access. So if you have a server on site, that might be something to look at with our or your IT team. We have applications on all of our laptops at home that we click, we securely connect back to our servers on site that in our offices, and we can access in real time our data. It's protected through a firewall and that infrastructure. And we can continue to do our business as usual. And again, I know that while some organizations don't necessarily have that infrastructure built now, we do know that IT companies are able to step in and very quickly build some of these tools and resources for nonprofit organizations. And I spoke with one yesterday, and they said, one of the things that we're doing, most frequently right now as IT company is creating these virtual connection platforms and access to remote servers, because we don't know how long people are going to be working from home. We don't, know what the status is. A couple people, shout out to the VPNs. I see in our chat box, a couple of people are using VPN. Yes, it's a great tool. We love it. It's awesome as well. The other thing that when we considered moving to working remotely was just making sure that people had laptops and access to it. If you don't have a laptop or your team doesn't have a laptop, making sure that you're able to connect to either your desktop at the office via a virtual desktop application. And people are going to ask me about what does that really mean? I don't know that that's the truth. It's called a virtual desktop, and your IT company can certainly help you set that up. But also printers. We did a quick assessment of all of our team to say, does everyone have printers at home? If not, let's grab one from the office. Can we take it home? Are there cheap, inexpensive ones that we can put in your home if you don't have that, so that you can still print out the things that you need to do if there's anything? The truth is we don't have a lot of paperwork in our world anymore, but there are still things you might need to print out for documentation purposes and things of that nature. So we did a quick assessment, and for the staff that could take home printers, that we had small devices in the office, we were able to. For those who didn't, we offered the opportunity that the organization would buy a small one and have it shipped to their house so that they could really still continue to do the work in the same way that they were in the past. And in terms of the infrastructure, one of the things that I think is really important to bring up in sort of your infrastructure and systems assessment is checking on insurance and workman's comp. And I think that's really important. As everyone's very quickly had to move to the work from home environment, I think one of those things in the infrastructure that we overlook is like, what happens now that our employees are working 100% remotely? Do you have the insurance and protection and workman's comp policies in place to really protect your employees, because they are working from home? But if they happen to fall at home during the work hours, what does that mean for your insurance? And I just encourage everyone to, as part of this assessment, connect with your insurance companies, connect with whomever might be running your larger organization to make sure that you've asked those questions, that you understand what that looks like. Sometimes companies will make you sign additional forms. They might require a different level of assessment or insurance. And you want to make sure that you're protecting your association, but also your employees and your teams during this time of crisis. One of the other things I thought we might want to talk about a little bit is employee considerations. I'm not sure, you have two people. Does everyone have Wi-Fi available? Do you work from your own cell phones? How are you handling that?
So we both have Wi-Fi, fortunately. Currently, we're working from our own cell phone, but the company is basically, the organization will cover it. But I mean, honestly, it's just, I'm having grace with my admin and she's having grace with me. We're all going through a difficult time. So I continue to meet with her and check in and kind of reiterate that this is something everyone keeps saying, unprecedented times. And, it's a challenge for everyone. And you mentioned that your husband or your son might pop in. And so for us, it's just kind of meeting and seeing what is a priority, what can wait, what do you need now, what don't you need. She has her laptop, she has her printer, she has her cell phone. She'll get reimbursed for the cost while she's working from home. And yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Like, it's just us. And so it's a lot easier than a larger team, but there's still the same considerations of being home and having a child at home or a spouse at home or pets who are excited to have you home who are hopping up in the background. So
yeah,
you know.
I think you bring up a really great point. I mean, cell phones and consideration, one of the things that we do, or we have always done, is reimburse a portion of our employees' cell phones, because we do use the app and we know that people are using their phone to check email and things of that nature. So certainly as you as leaders begin to transition your teams or have already transitioned your teams to the work remote policy, I certainly encourage you to look at cell phone reimbursement. I know that there's, often tight funds, but even a little bit really goes a long way in making our employees and our teams feel as if we value their time and their resources. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge that they are using their personal devices to do business and they're being compensated. The other thing that we have done here in New Jersey is that while we're working remotely, we're also reimbursing our employees a percentage of their wireless or their internet access every month. We thought that, sometimes people have limited bandwidth available to them, and we wanted to make sure that if they did need to increase it because they're going to be doing a lot more internet work and Skypes and phone calls and things of that nature, that we had the ability to sort of compensate them or at least reimburse them in a reasonable way during this time. Just a question. Somebody has a question for you. If you'd like, maybe you can tackle it. Talk a little bit more about Slack. They're not familiar with it. Would you like to speak a little bit about it?
Sure. So Slack is a project management tool. I don't think any nonprofits are that familiar with it yet, but it's literally like a large chat interface. Once you log in, there's the opportunity to have a variety of channels. And so if you're working with someone on fundraising, you can have a fundraising channel within the tool or the platform, and you can invite everyone from your team who's working on fundraising to that channel. So as you see articles or resources or worksheets or what have you, you can upload those different tools into that particular Slack channel. And then every person who is working on fundraising would be able to see it and comment. But other people on the team who aren't working on fundraising, they wouldn't have access to that channel. Other things you could have, for example, event planning. You could have an event planning channel. So everyone from your team who is working on event planning, you can share ideas and tools. You could also, for example, use it just to check in with your team. Everyone who joins Slack is privy to a general channel and a random channel. And so if you, for example, message the channel good morning, everyone, every single person within the interface would receive the good morning message or other messages. You can also individually chat with people or have private chats. And so, again, I think a lot of tech companies primarily utilize Slack during the day to kind of keep up to date with people with, on different projects and what have you, but we found it useful.
Yeah, we use Slack as well, and we use it to say good morning. A couple of people were asking if it's like Microsoft Teams. Yes, absolutely. It is like Microsoft Teams, and we actually use both, which is a little bit confusing. So our teams internally in our state, we use Slack, and we are on it all day long, shooting messages to each other. Good morning. Right now we have thank you to Jeff on our team who started a spirit ensemble of the day challenge. So he's been posting that. So today is hat day. We all put on our hats and slacked each other just to keep morale up and some levity to our day because we don't have that opportunity to connect. But we also share work and resources via Slack. And hey, I'm stepping offline. I'm going to take a break to, take a walk or something. It's a really great tool. Also, Microsoft Teams is a really good one as well. And we use that on a national level. So that's how some of us executive directors and my counterparts and connect with our national team. So it cuts down on email, things that you don't necessarily need a response to, or just an FYI or collaboration and check-in. Those are really great sort of instant messaging tools that help do that. I see people say, yes, they're using Teams and Slack, and lots of people agreeing that it's a great tool. If we could only pick one, what would I pick? That's a great question. Oh, and a hard one. I don't know. I think I would probably pick Slack. I think it's easier to use. And the one thing I do enjoy about Slack is that not everybody has to be associated with an Outlook or Microsoft. And so that is one of the downfalls, although it works for us as an association because we all have Microsoft 365. If you're a team who has a number of different volunteers or board members, et cetera, it might not be the platform for you. And Slack has the ability to just bring everybody with different email addresses together, and that might be a better fit for you. One of the things that we also use, I know you use Google Docs, and people have started to talk about it a little bit more in the nonprofit sector, is the use of Trello, Trello. And our board of directors uses it, and it's a great free platform that allows you to invite people to it and sort of organize, whether it be more board meeting minutes, notes, agendas, projects, assign deliverables to people. It's kind of like a project management tool with sort of an easier interface. And we've started to use that with our board of directors as a way to communicate and keep our bylaws and everything securely stored and be able to make sure that we're sharing it openly and freely and people can sort of access that. But our teams use it as well to keep on track for our design of our, social media platforms and projects that we have ongoing. So that's definitely a tool to look at. Questions about our Slack, is it free? Yes, Slack is free and great. There might be a limit of how many messages. Do you know that?
You could actually apply. So Slack is free, but if you want an upgraded account, you can apply through TechSoup to get a nonprofit discount on an upgraded account or a free account. I think it's for less than 200 people. And if you're approved as a 501c3, you can get access. One thing I want to say, I'm seeing some of the comments and resources. We've utilized Trello. Trello is great. But even though there's just two of us, there's so much software out there, and you really have to figure out what's best for you. And so I would definitely recommend that you kind of, do the free trials and test some things out, but everything isn't going to work for everyone. Like I said, we've utilized Asana, we've utilized Basecamp, we've utilized Trello. We've done so many things, but then you realize you just need one or two things that sometimes, just because it's there and it's cool doesn't mean that you have to use it, especially if you have something that's working well for you. It can get confusing with so many different logins and some information is here, some information is here. So definitely try a few and then just stick with it.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really great point. Particularly now that a lot of people are forced to work remotely and figure out these new systems and infrastructure. Take a day or two, play around with a few, and then just commit to one. It's certainly a lot out there, and you don't have to embrace all of it. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you manage working and creating a virtual culture. You've been doing this a lot longer than all of us, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what does that look like and what does that mean?
So for myself, I need a lot of structure. In order to successfully work from home for 6+ years, you really have to be organized and self-motivated. And so, I may look like business on top, but it's definitely party on the bottom. I'm sure you all have seen, people laughing that they have sweatpants and whatever in the background. That's fine, just as long as when you are on camera, you are presentable. But for me, I wake up 6:30 in the morning. I have my breakfast, I go to the gym, and then I know between these hours. So similar to if you were going to the office and you had a structure for your day, you really need to do that for your work day from home. And I know a lot of people have their children at home now and they're trying to figure out, I've seen the bulletin boards and the schedules. And so, yes, doing that with your kids now that they're home, but also doing that with yourself with room for flexibility. And so what we do is, like I said, wake up, breakfast, gym, whatever. But then in the morning, my assistant and I, we let ourselves know when we're online and when we're working. If we're getting ready to take a lunch break, we chat each other, taking lunch. If I'm running an errand, because when you work from home, you can kind of run errands, I'll say, about to run an errand, be right back. Then I'll leave, and then as soon as I'm back, I'll chat her to let her know that I'm back online. And so just those simple cues so that people kind of know where you are since you're not in the office and people aren't seeing you has been very, very helpful for us. But then also just checking in. Ever since the COVID epidemic, we have started something called happy hour. And so on our calendars, every day at 4:00, we have happy hour. And so because it is stressful times, I realized the importance of practicing gratitude. So at 4:00, Idalia will call me and I'll say, are you ready for a happy hour? Who's going first? And we literally will share what we're grateful for that day. And it could be something as simple as, I'm grateful that I went for a walk today. I'm grateful that we figured out a plan to reschedule our conference. And it's something that we have been doing for over a week, and we know that we're going to do it. And it's kind of helped calm things down, but make you realize that, yes, you know, there's a lot of stressors in the world right now, but there are still things within our day that we can be grateful for. And that has really helped us. We also just implemented the NSWN virtual chats. Today is a community chat. So if you're available, a little plug, come to it at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And that is something else that is helping to ground us, but helping to ground our members. And so those are just a few of the little things that are structured within our day and that kind of keep things routine as well as keep the communication flowing.
I love that. There are a couple of people in the chat box who had questions about gratitude and love the idea of that. And also a couple of questions about, you know, how are you managing your teams who also have small children at home and are doing homeschooling? And I thought that it'd be a good time to sort of address how we're handling virtual culture within NASW. I think first and foremost, it was really important for us to sort of acknowledge what's happening and the need for uniqueness and flexibility within my team. Because our team is a little bit larger and several of us have children who are now 100% homeschooled, it's just different. It is different for everyone. And each school district, at least here in New Jersey, but I know around the country, are handling how they do homeschool a little bit differently. And I know as a working mother that I am incredibly challenged with, you know, making sure that I am still productive and I can do as much as I can at work, but also now having to learn Common Core math, which is awful. I don't know who invented that. But the truth is, we're not going to be as productive as we would normally. I'm usually able to shut off motherhood, go to my office and do business, and then come back to motherhood. And I really want to acknowledge that there has to be this flexibility and just sort of giving grace to each other to say, you're not going to be able to do 100% of what you used to be able to do. It's just not possible right now. So we talk a lot about that as a team of like, you know, I try to get up online a little bit early and acknowledge and do emails, but then I'm off for a few hours because I have to teach math and science and do projects. And mine is 7. So 7 is a really hard age to just homeschool. So as a team, making sure that you're communicating with each other about what does your day really look like and being able to have a lot of flexibility in that. The other thing that we are really focused on, and it is difficult for teams who haven't been virtual, who are now entirely virtual, shifting from the idea that you're measuring activity to now measuring results. So when we came to the office, sometimes work was just coming to the office. That's what it looked like. But now we really have to be very specific about what our performance indicators look like. What are we trying to do? What are the deliverables? And how does everybody participate in that and contribute to that. So right now, one of the biggest things that we're doing as a team is moving our physical conference of 1,500 people plus to a virtual conference. So we all have very specific tasks, meeting with the vendors, looking for the platforms, communicating with the exhibitors, making sure that we're communicating with our attendees so that they know that this is still happening, just in a different space. It's not just about showing up anymore. It's about, did you do X, Y, and Z on the task list? And that's a shift for people. But it's possible. We just have to have open communication about that, and also realistic expectations for our team about when that work is going to be done. So, maybe I'm not the best person to reach out to exhibitors all day long because I have a small child. And while that might have been something I would do normally, it might just not be possible for me right now. So another staff member would pick that up. But maybe refund requests is something that I can definitely do. It's not public facing. I'm not needing to speak with anybody during normal business hours. I can do that at 4:30 in the morning when I jump online. So I can pick up and be flexible with that as well. So that's something that, we really tried to balance. Hey, this is Gail. There's a lot of
really quickly, I was just going to say, I completely agree. Again, we are a small team, but we just announced that our conference was being rescheduled. And while we're trying our best to continue business as usual, I realized that's not necessarily possible. So we have my assistant, Dahlia, and we've been meeting to really look at, between now and the next few months, what are the primary things that we absolutely have to do and what are realistic expectations for that. But then also when we meet for supervision, if it's not done, obviously there's a lot of stressors in the world going on. So you can't be upset about it. It's okay. Let's look at our priorities again and let's readjust and make kind of, new timelines for those. What can I help with? What can I assist with? And just really being flexible with it. And so we've been doing that and it's working. There's things, for example, that maybe I wanted to start next week, but realizing, is that realistic right now? Does it have to happen next week? No. And I think for myself, one of the good things about it, I tend to be someone who goes, I'm always moving, and this is allowing me to really slow down and think about the organization after all of this. So if we've been doing all of this normally, how will things change having gone through this? Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to work from home. So a lot of these new processes are very familiar to me, but what are practices that we'll keep afterwards? And I think a lot of organizations really need to think about that. Are you going to be more flexible with your staff in terms of allowing them to work from home from time to time? Are you going to connect virtually more often? And I think that is important to consider, because I think it would be a mistake if we completely went back to business as usual afterwards, knowing that we know how vital and critical this technological virtual world is in order to keep us functioning and flowing. So just wanted to bring that in before we continue.
No, I think that's a really great point. And to your point, there are definitely things that are getting put in the parking lot that would have been on our radar right now. And even just common functions of our associations and probably everyone's virtual work, that you just have to say, this is now not the priority, even though it's something we've been doing every week. We're going to put that aside because, maybe we need to now work on developing our virtual aptitude or developing programs online. And that was something that was a longer term goal for us, but now is more immediate since we can't come together. But also making sure that as managers, we're not losing sight of the long-term vision of the association. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because we had a meeting for our next quarter planning as a team. And I said, we can move it from this week. It doesn't have to happen this week, but it has to happen next, because we can't lose sight of where we're headed just because we're triaging a crisis right now. So making sure that we're making space for those conversations so that we don't lose sight of when this ends, and it will, to do that. I know that we have a lot of questions coming through. I'm wondering, Annie, if you want to jump in and maybe we would field a few before we continue on.
Yeah, there's a few questions that you guys can answer. Let's see. Someone had just asked your thoughts on postponing or canceling fundraising initiatives at this point in time and continuing to fundraise in a virtual manner.
Any thoughts on that?
It's so difficult. I think one thing all of us have realized is how critical the in-person events and conferences are to our revenue. Like I said, we have an annual conference each year, which is supposed to be in June in New York. We've been planning it for over 7 months, but with our current state of things, we just don't know how things will be in June. So we had to make the decision to reschedule, and it was very difficult, but obviously safety is most important. And so the way we handled it was we let people know that we are rescheduling it for next year. We're still trying to figure out what the rescheduled date will be. But in terms of registrations that have already been paid, we gave people the opportunity to receive a full refund if they want a full refund without any fees. I think it would be unreasonable to charge people if they do want a refund. So we honored that. We also gave them the opportunity to defer their registration. So if they are committed and they want to come to the conference next year at the rescheduled date, then they were able to just move that registration money to the following year. We're also a 501c3, so we also gave the opportunity to move registration to a tax-deductible donation. Other things, because we were so far in our planning that presenters had already been notified of acceptance, we gave presenters the opportunity to move their acceptance to next year, which is good for us because we don't have to go through the call for proposals process again. If everyone says yes, for the most part, we already have the full agenda for next year's conference. Other things we've done, we're going to offer a few things virtually, but because we are a smaller team, logistically, it would be almost impossible and pretty expensive to try to bring our conference online. So we're not going to do that, but we are going to bring a few things online. For example, we have an Emerging Leaders Institute, which is usually a pre-conference institute. We'll do that institute online. We'll still charge for it. And those are some of the things we've been doing. I think the main thing is communication. Right now, people want to know what's going on. People have bought plane tickets. They have reserved hotels. We all know it's going to take a while to get reimbursed and get in touch with these different vendors. And so just communicating where you are, what your thought process is, letting people know that you're not ignoring them, that you're working with them, that you're sorry for the inconvenience. Those are different strategies. And then otherwise, sponsorship. I still need to contact all my sponsors. That's something on my to-do list. But my hope is that some sponsors who have already paid, there are many things within the network that they could still support. And so my hope is that we're not necessarily going to be refunding sponsorship money, but that we can move the sponsorship to another activity of our organization for this fiscal year. If you are a network member, it could be someone sponsoring the Monday Morning Manager or the Saturday Morning Buzz or the Change Makers of Color program. Those are things that I think are reasonable. And so for you, if you are fundraising, just figuring out other things you could do with the money if they have already paid, or just talking to them and having an honest conversation to figure out if you can't support right now, when can we follow up with you for support?
Yeah, it's certainly a conversation that we are having as well. And we actually had just had a phone call this morning about it, and the idea of continuing to cultivate our donors and to make sure that they still feel connected to the organization during this time. And I think my feeling on immediate fundraising is unless there's a need for the organization and you're providing direct responses during the crisis, it's not an ethical solution to sort of fundraise in the back of a crisis. But that doesn't mean that you stop your fundraising activities because your organization isn't stopping. You know, the truth is, for us, we are doing more content, more online, more outreach, creating more community engagement opportunities, not just for social workers, but we're also doing, you know, videos and sessions with LCSWs online to help support the community. And I think, you know, making sure that our donors understand that we're still here, we're still active, we're doing as much as we can to continue to be out in front of not only all of the social work issues, but, you know, particularly the COVID-19 crisis, and just continuing to engage them in the conversation is really important to me. So I feel like the short answer is, yes, you can still continue to do fundraising and move it online and look for people who are similarly aligned in their goals, and maybe you'll find somebody who is also interested in continuing to do more outreach and resources, and they can sponsor your fireside chats, for example, is something new that we've started. But it's also a really good time to just continue to connect with those people who have already given to the association, to make sure that they know that because of their support and their ongoing support, these things were possible, and that they should really feel proud of the investment they've made in the organization. And I always say that fundraising isn't transactional. It's transformative, and it's about building something together, not I'm going to give you money and I'm going to get this thing for it. That's not what we want to create ever. And so I think the answer is yes, you can still do fundraising.
I like that. Transformative, not transactional. Quick other point to that, if you do have grant dollars, making sure that you're contacting your funders. For example, the network has a Policy Fellows program that is funded by the New York Community Trust. And one of our deliverables was that our fellows actually had to present at this conference, which is now rescheduled. So as soon as I realized that we were going to have to reschedule it, I contacted the foundation and spoke to my program officer, and we came up with another strategy. So instead of our fellows coming to the conference that's canceled, they're going to present their work online. And that's something that we work through. And then also vendors. There are a few vendors that I already paid. And I mean, you can't necessarily ask people, I guess you can, but it's a little bit challenging right now to ask people to just give you your money back. And so a lot of our vendors were very understanding. And if I paid my photographer a deposit, he's just going to keep the deposit for next year. If I paid my event planner a deposit, they're just going to keep it to next year. And so making sure you're having those type of conversations, because people are being very reasonable right now. And I think collaborative. People want to work together through this crisis.
Absolutely. Annie, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I will say that if you see in the chat box, Helen French had said information about fund development. She is our Director of Development and Continuing Education, so she is a wonderful resource on, you know, building relationships and, you know, developing fundraising strategies. But somebody had asked, kind of switching gears and going back to what you all were talking about earlier, someone had asked about, you had mentioned Google offering tech support to nonprofits, and just sharing a bit more about what that is and how to access that.
Do you want to take that for the Google?
So Google has a Google for Nonprofits site. So if you go to Google and you Google for Nonprofits, you should be able to access all of the different resources and offerings. LinkedIn actually has a LinkedIn for Nonprofits as well. And so some of these tech companies that we utilize all the time, most of them have a philanthropy arm, which will usually offer free or discounted resources for nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll continue to post those resources online and send out some information post this webinar on all of them, because there are a lot of organizations and companies that are offering that as well. Are there any others, or would you like us to keep trucking along, Annie, and wait for the rest of the questions in a little bit.
Yeah, there's just one more question I think that we can answer now. It's pertaining to what you've talked about. You know, someone had said that they are new to their agency, and now that they're working remotely and having difficulty engaging with some of their supervisees, despite having conversations, partially because they're new and partially because of the online format. So if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the idea of building relationships and holding people probably accountable when you're new to an organization, that can be really difficult. I think first and foremost is starting out with the care of the person and being really authentic and acknowledging that we don't know all of the challenges or situations that people are facing in their homes, or just how this is impacting them. And my suggestion is always to start there with, you know, anybody that you're supervising in your team, just checking in. How is it going? You know, how is this affecting you? Do you have enough support and resources? Do you need, you know, to take some time off? Do we need to talk about a modified work schedule? Just so you can really understand, or at least to the ability that you can, what they're going through and how this is impacting them. I think, and I shared this with my team, that we all have our breakdown moment a little bit differently. And sometimes that might look like reluctance or inability to work together. For me, it was standing in the grocery store, looking at the shelves going, this is the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my life, and just having a cry fest with a random stranger in the grocery store. So we're all gonna have these moments, and like just connecting with your team, just like, how are you doing? What do you need? How can I be supportive? But then also making it really clear about, like, there are some things that we just have to get done. We understand and we want to acknowledge the hardship that this is placing on people and the need for flexibility and just space to acknowledge and give each other grace. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be accountable and moving work forward. And having an honest conversation with them to say, you know, here are the 15 things that might be on your list. What feels the most important? Let's agree on what's most important. Let's commit to doing these 5 things right now. And, you know, we are going to have to evaluate on the next 5 things. But if you have something that comes up, I'm going to ask that you share that with me. You don't have to give me the details of it, but if you need time off, if you have somebody who's now been affected by it, and that's a real concern, particularly on the East Coast right now. I feel like I'm living in the epicenter of it. You know, we're in the New York City area. It is going, we do have friends and family that are being impacted by this all over the country. And staff might need some time to manage that and to cope with that, or just some grace in dealing with that. But asking our teams to really say, hey, this is what I'm facing. This is what I heard today. This is the news. This is how it's impacting me. So that you can have that honest two-way conversation and be able to say, okay, now as your manager, I'm going to, you know, I'll give you an extra day or 2 to get this thing taken care of. Or is there something I can do to remove the barrier, or I can help pick up the slack, but then we're going to add 2 more things once these things get taken care of. So it's
I love that, Jen. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, I noticed I'm very active on social media. And so I saw for my doctoral program, we have a private Facebook group, and someone posted like a check-in, and it literally had, how are you feeling today, with different colored hearts, and the hearts describe different things like that. And so just doing a post check, I mentioned the happy hour, the gratitude check, but perhaps in the morning doing a post check with your team to see how they're feeling. I think for you as a manager, that's going to give you an idea as to that person's productivity for the day. If they're feeling like the world is about to end, then you're going to know upfront that perhaps all of the things on their list, they're not really going to be able to do that. And so really checking in, especially as a new manager, showing that you care. I saw that someone put in the chat that it's allowing us to kind of connect and be more compassionate. And it is. And so meeting virtually with whomever is on your team and really, how are you today? How are you feeling? And letting people have the opportunity to share and to process through that, letting them know that you care. And then, okay, once you have also shared, I think it's important to be transparent and let them know that you're also fearful, if you're fearful, that you're hopeful or optimistic or what have you. And then, so you do that. And then, okay, so what's in your list? You know, what's a reasonable time frame for this, and then walking through it that way. Maybe midpoint, a little chat. How are you doing? Have things gotten better? Anything I can do? And then you mentioned earlier, Jen, the flexibility of letting people in slightly earlier. For example, Idalia, she has a daughter who's at home. And so, it would be unreasonable if we thought everyone's going to work as normal right now. And so if someone needs to end a little bit earlier and then come back later to work on a few projects, I think that we should be open to that type of flexibility. I think it's absolutely necessary. I know for myself, I'm giving myself that grace, and we need to make sure we're giving all of our team members the same grace.
Yeah. I also think one of the great tools that you can use as a manager and a leader during this crisis is forcing your staff to take some time and saying, everyone shut down the computer, go for a walk if it's nice out today. Everyone step away, go have lunch, go do something outside of, work. Because I think sometimes our teams can feel like, particularly those who don't have children running around demanding all of this attention and time and energy. There's this I need to be online, I need to be connected, I need to be showing that. But just to say, hey, go step away, disconnect for a little while, and showing the gratitude in that way and making sure that they're also taking care of their mental health. Before we jump into more questions, I see that there are a lot coming up. I wanted to just get back to the idea of a virtual culture and checking in on one another and how we stay connected. I think one of the things that I feel really passionately about is, and I think all leaders should be doing, is over communicate during this time. When you can't see each other, when you don't know what's going on, when every day seems to change from one minute to the next almost, making sure that you're over communicating and doing so as a team, but also with your board and certainly with your constituencies, whether they be an agency or your clients, whatever the case might be. Making sure that they understand, even if you don't have an answer. The last weekend was a really great example for us. We had new news coming out from our governor, and we didn't necessarily have the answers. The information was confusing at best, but just sending out a message that said, hey, we heard it too. We're really unsure what this means. We're working hard to get you some guidance. It will be, we'll be back with as much guidance as we can. And then following up on that communication. And with our teams as well, saying, hey, this is where I'm at. I didn't get this done, but I'm going to pick this up. Or, hey, do you have 2 minutes to just check in about this thing that I heard about? Maybe it's a good resource for us. Also keeping meetings and one-on-ones. I know sometimes when you're virtual and you've been meeting in person, it feels like, oh, maybe we don't need to do that now. But getting on track and staying committed to those one-on-one meetings is really important, probably now more so than ever, so that you can continue to build that rapport with people. We have this sort of mantra amongst our team as well, that if you can't contribute or strengthen the dialogue right now, it's not allowed. We just don't have any space for the negativity, and either internally as a team, and we don't have that normally, but really making sure that we commit to strengthening the conversation and enhancing one another's work, and also making sure that we support that within our community as well. I think sometimes people can be overly critical and say, oh, this thing didn't work out, or this webinar was faulty. Yes, we can acknowledge that, but again, making sure that we're giving that idea of grace that you bring up to everybody and say, well, a webinar may have not gone as we would have liked it, but we don't know what was happening on the other end of that conversation. And we don't have space for this criticism right now. This is a time to come together, to be supportive, and really build on each other's strengths and pick up where one another is faulting. Our team is doing virtual huddles. I love the idea. Somebody slacked it today that they had a virtual cooler talk, 5 or 10 minute conversation where they spent 5 minutes talking about work and the next 10 minutes gabbing about life and personal stuff, and how that makes people feel more connected. We've also started talking about, and I think this is really important for teams in this virtual culture, and particularly a virtual culture where there's a health crisis, is acknowledging that there's a health crisis and that there's a need for cross-training right now. So who's going to be the backup to my thing? Whatever the thing might be, making sure that somebody is a point person. If you can, we have the flexibility and the luxury of that, it feels like. You're a 2-person team, so it's a little bit different. but just so that we all know what's going on, because we don't know at any point in time, we could be faced with a loved one who's impacted by COVID, or we could ourselves be impacted by it. And we want to make sure that we have people who can just serve as a backup. And we don't have to be subject matter experts in it, but just have somebody who can be that liaison and pick up the ball and run with it is really important. We have somebody that says 5 teams, 10 to 15 minute daily huddle. We love that idea. I'm just curious in the chat box.
You mentioned communication and boards, so important. I realize that I'm pretty sure some of my board members are here, so hello. But they have their organizations that they're running. They have their schools that they're leading through this crisis. So also having grace with your board of directors. I'm part of a few different groups where I've seen that some people have indicated that their board has disappeared, that they haven't heard from them. But I think that it's our role as executives to, even if they're a little bit silent right now, dealing with how this issue kind of impacts them and their core job, making sure that you're still communicating with them, that you're sending out email updates and letting them know what's going on, what your plan is, so that when things do kind of slow down a little bit for them, they're already updated on everything that's going on with you. I think that's so critical. But then also bringing your board, if you previously met in person, my board is national, so we were utilizing conference calls and now we utilize Zoom for our meetings. But this is a great opportunity to get your board hooked on technology and utilizing these resources. You also mentioned maintaining meetings, making sure your board is still meeting for your different board committees. Very, very important that the operations of the organization continues, again, with flexibility, but that you're still doing the things that you need to do as much as possible.
I think that's incredibly important. Our board, giving them grace because they're all dealing with the same things that we are. We have, it's interesting time for us as an association, and I feel like many probably are in the same boat, that we've started to dabble with the work remote and what does that look like in a virtual environment. And our board has begun to meet virtually on occasion. But now we've really been thrust into this, and it's time for all of us to embrace technology, and we're sort of learning as we go. But our boards are now, both New Jersey and Delaware are meeting virtually using video, and it's been an incredible tool for us to continue to stay connected and brainstorm. So I encourage that as well. Other things that I wanted to think about, a little outside of the idea of culture, but just how are you measuring some of your performance indicators? So the work, are you taking a look now at website traffic, social media, some analytics, stuff that tells the story of the work that your team is doing? Have you guys taken a dive into any of that recently?
Not necessarily. In the past, I used to track Google Analytics for our website. I'd say the primary analytics that I'm tracking right now is in terms of who's reading the newsletters that we send out and the different campaigns. So we're looking kind of at the impact factor and the scoring for those different things that we're sending out. Later on, we'll do a comparison to see if things are kind of more well-read now than they were before. We also send out a lot of daily articles in leadership and management on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I've noticed now that more people are working from home, that a lot of those things that we share are more well-read and liked or what have you. And then also the community chats. We are paying attention to how many people are actually showing up for those chats, who the people are, as well as where they're coming from. And so we just started the chats last week and we had over 35 people. And it was interesting kind of the range of who was coming, from students all the way to deans of schools of social work. And so for us, those type of metrics are helpful because these are obviously engaged network members, but they're also people who feel that we have something that they could benefit from or need during this time. But that's about it. I think that's about all we can do right now.
Yeah, it's often really hard to look at the analytics and particularly make time for it right now. And one of the things that we have found interesting, and I encourage those who perhaps already had like a voice over internet system in place or start to implement that, is taking a look at the analytics of your association. Our director of communications and advocacy sent around some statistics on our open rates of our emails lately, and they've skyrocketed. And I think that really speaks to the value of the content that we continue to put out and the need to over communicate with our constituencies. But the other thing I did was take a step back and look at an acknowledgement that maybe some of the big project work isn't getting done. But we looked at our phone system, and a voice over internet phone system allows you to take a look at the volume of incoming calls and who they're speaking with and the amount of time each call we spend on each call. And when I looked at the amount of calls we're receiving now as a team, we're really spending an exorbitant amount of time responding to members' questions and concerns and directing them to information, whether they be in private practice or community members looking for connectivity. And that's been a good place for us to also take a step back as managers to say, okay, I might not be moving this project along, or this new, I had great plans for Social Work Month. I'm telling you, our schedule looked amazing. We had so many in-person events and trainings and meetups, but we're not doing that now. So, okay, those things aren't happening. We didn't get to move forward on a lunch and learn project that we were really excited about, but we did field 150 ethics phone calls or, 62 legal consultations this month. And I think that those things really talk, again, to the productivity, but are just analytics that I probably wouldn't have looked at otherwise. Now I've invested. It was a slippery slope for me because now I can benchmark and look back on months past, but looking at some of those analytics to tell the story as well. And one of the things that we also started to do was just create a space for people to come together, our members. And I think this might be something that you definitely have created, but would be good for everyone and applicable to different practice settings and different nonprofit organizations, is these virtual spaces for communities to come together. You're doing them. Last night we did a paint and sip. We had an artist who streamed a live instruction and tutorial, and it was free for everyone to join because you had to go out and find your own paint supplies, but she sent a list out to everyone. We all jumped online and we had these fun paintings that we did. And it was just a time for us to sort of unwind and relax and come together. And I think that's maybe a tool that could be useful for other organizations, either as a team building activity and respite, or as something that you can sort of translate over to the communities that you serve.
I love the paint and sip idea. I saw that and I thought, I want to do it. So
we won't judge the outcome on my end, but it was fun.
There's also, Instagram has had a lot of concerts. So it's DJs in their home who are DJing different parties and sets. And there's the Netflix movie nights with chat functions. And like you said, team building can still occur online. So I think one of the great things about this is that we're going to figure out more creative ways to connect and communicate with our teams that we probably wouldn't have done. Another thing I want to mention, I saw that someone mentioned now is a really great opportunity for the network. When I first started with the network, we had this program called Executive Circle. This is my first time ever being an executive. And when I first started, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so isolating and lonely. So I started the Executive Circle, and it was Leadership is Lonely at the top. But the busier I got rid of the program. I put it on hold, where it's still a program of the network, but I just didn't prioritize it. And with everything that's going on, I've realized that I need to bring that program back because, yes, all of us are going through this, but those who are in leadership roles, I'm pretty sure the feeling is heightened because not only are you dealing with this personally and with your family, but you're also responsible for a team and or an art organization. So having a space where you can meet with like-minded people who understand what you're going through, whether it's questioning, if you're going to have to lay off some employees or how you're going to pay your rent for your office, I think those are conversations where you should have the space to kind of openly share and connect with other executives who are now met with these concerns due to COVID-19.
Yeah, that is such an important thing for us to do, to be able to come together as leaders and talk through some of the challenges, because you're right. It is lonely when you're in a leadership role, and you need the ability to sort of brainstorm and just sort of commiserate and talk through some of the challenges that you have with one another. A question came through the Q&A box, and you'll hear my son in the background. I'm sorry, folks. A question about ensuring accountability for staff versus engaging in a micromanaging style. What are your thoughts on that?
I've mentioned grace quite a bit, and you've mentioned grace. I think that it's important to have grace and be flexible, but I think the reality is that we are all employed and we have job functions that need to be done and taken care of. And so while we're going to be flexible and we realize that, everyone is handling these issues differently, I think we also need to have open and honest conversations with our staff that they still need to do their job. And so they may get a little bit more time to do their job, but they still need to do their job. And so I don't know what that looks like. Everyone handles these conversations differently. I'm not someone who likes to micromanage. I don't recommend it, actually. But I think that whatever your style is, when you are meeting one-on-one with your employees, letting them know that you're going through this, that you care, that you want to hear from them, while also saying there's different objectives. We don't want to come on the other side of this pandemic and nothing was done and our organizations are falling apart because nothing was done. We want to still be able to kind of get back to normal as much as we can, considering. And so it really depends on your style, but I think you do need to have the conversation that while I'm going to be more flexible, these are the things that have to get done. What about you, Jen? How are you handling that?
Yeah, I think there is that honest conversation. And I think it's also about ensuring and creating the culture, and sort of that idea that we always have a backup and we always have, people checking in on what we're doing, and sort of redefining that sorry, folks, that's not micromanaging, but that's really just about us protecting the organization. And I think it's okay to just call that out and to say, hey, this isn't about micromanaging right now. It's not about that. It's about making sure that we're all moving forward, that anything can change on a moment's notice. And because of that, we want to hold tight to our teams. We want to make sure that you feel supportive, but that we also know what's happening if and when something else should change drastically. And understanding that's a little uncomfortable right now. It feels really foreign for leaders as well, who are just very much accustomed to saying, I'm not going to micromanage. And I think it's okay to say to our teams, like, this feels uncomfortable for me as well. I don't like to be checking in this type of way, but this is what the situation calls for these days. And we're all going to have to just be vulnerable and acknowledging that this feels foreign and different, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's wrong. This is something that no one ever anticipated.
Yeah, I think also part of that is, as part of your culture, your team should know that they can ask for help. So yes, there's things that need to be done, but if they are drowning, they should feel comfortable to come to you and say, I'm drowning. Can we walk through this? Can you help with this? Is there someone else who can take it, as opposed to just not doing it? And so I completely agree in terms of the checking in, but I think we should have a workplace culture where people can be open and honest and say, I need help right now.
Yeah. And I think this is, for managers in particular, I think this is a good opportunity for us to, take a step back and assess, how have we seen our teams, if you've had the opportunity to work with them for a while, how does anxiety present itself in each person? When have I seen them at their most stressed? how can I be intentional about looking for those signs in each one of my team members and, asking them for what they need? How can I be helpful? What can I do to support you? Or is there someone else that we can bring in to support you is really important. And it's a practice that I'm having to cultivate in terms of, checking in. How are you feeling? I think sometimes even my team would even say that sometimes I'm not the most touchy-feely, and I'm like, let's just get down to business. But it's an opportunity for me to learn as well.
Yeah, same.
Annie, do we have any other questions that have come in that we want to address before we move on?
Yeah, something that I had seen while you were both talking is a question relating to, as you had said, managers might have much more on their plate. And now with this crisis, how do you manage your own wellness in this? We're talking a lot about managing the employees' wellness, but you need to manage your own wellness as well.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
For myself, I am taking a lot of walks. I knew working from home that if you challenged me to a Fitbit challenge, I would lose because I never received enough steps in my day. But going to the gym kind of counterbalanced that. Now that I can't go to the gym, I've tried the workout videos from home and I don't really like those too much. So instead, I've been walking at a social distance around my neighborhood and really just breathing and taking in the space around me. I'm also trying my best within reason to get enough sleep. That's something that is crucial considering everything we're going through. I also keep the former therapist in me. I keep a set of meditation or intention cards at my desk. And so every morning I read one of those cards and I kind of reflect and think about what that means. And throughout the day, I'll look at the card again. Other things, just closing my eyes from time to time and breathing, quick meditation. Those are some of the strategies that are helpful for me right now, beyond the Netflix binge.
I think for me as well, there's a couple of things. Hold on just a second. One is giving myself just a ton of grace that this environment looks really different. And we're all we have a small house and we're all in each other's space, and that it's a little bit crazy sometimes, and just trying to be very kind with myself and my family about it's okay. There's going to be people walking in the background and you've got to laugh about it a little bit because it is a little bit ridiculous, the times that we're living in. For me, some of my self-care practices, and probably the biggest one, has been creating an intentional shutdown. Every night, and it depends because I'm working a little bit later, but at the end of whatever my work day feels like or is, I physically lock my stuff up. I have a file cabinet. I put it in the file cabinet. I put my laptop and my work phone away and I lock it. I take the keys and I give them to someone. And I say, I'm done. I have to be done for the day because I just need to protect myself and my sanity and just not be connected 24/7. So really instituting that ritual that before I got to leave an office, I don't get to do that now. Now I lock it up and I separate. I also have been going for more walks. I tell everybody I bought a pandemic bike and I rushed out and I said, I'm going to need a bike. I'm going to have to survive this. I'm going to have to go on bike rides. And I am really fortunate that I have, a child at home who makes me take midday breaks and play with balloons, and just allowing myself to be okay with that. Whereas I normally would have been like, oh, I'm in the middle of a work day, I can't. But trying to just go with the flow and make pizza for lunch and find the joy in some of those little things. I'm desperately missing the gym as well. So trying to do some at-home yoga, trying to, be meditative in the morning and read some books. I also have taken this as an opportunity to learn more about leadership and to continue to grow. So Brené Brown has been my spiritual junkie recently, and I'm reading a lot of her books. So just trying to build in some time for myself and being really good about shutting down completely and walking away. There's some of myself.
I love your boundaries. I think that's so important to be able to just shut off I don't have those type of boundaries with regards to work. But I think for people who can do that, it's important and so necessary. And hopefully after the pandemic, you'll continue to ride that bike.
I will probably ride the bike, but as my team will tell you, I'm not very good at shutting down, and I'm a notorious 3 a.m. emailer, but I'm really trying to work on self-care and better practices. Annie, were there any other questions that popped up? I did see a few as well.
Yeah, one I've seen a few times in different ways of asking is asking about, for managers who have staff that are currently not working because they have in-person positions that now are no longer being able to be held because we're all shelter in place, and how to keep them engaged even though they're not actually doing a lot of work remotely because they can't.
Do you want to tackle that?
I don't have that experience, but if I did, I would ensure that they still had access to the laptops and the phones and what have you, and that you were still checking in with them. I would also work with them to come up with some other projects and activities that they could work on in the meantime. I don't know what that might look like, but I would do my best to ensure that they're still engaged and they're still productive and working on projects.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think now is a great time for us who have teams that, for example, office managers and people on our teams who might have different functions that aren't necessarily, able to be performed right now, to maybe help out. And for us, that might be making membership calls. It might be, helping, do some graphic work. It might mean, helping out as a backup and learning some of our conference and our online stuff. But just trying to be flexible and give everyone a meaningful opportunity to contribute. I know my team in particular, everyone is so great and they want to feel valued and helpful and pitch in wherever they can. And so it might be outside of their role, but giving people an opportunity to help in a different way is really important.
Oh, another thing I just thought of, a lot of organizations don't prioritize talent development. They also don't necessarily have the resources, the funding, or the time. And so if you do have staff whose work is kind of not possible right now, for example, this webinar was free. There are a lot of organizations who are offering free webinars right now. So making sure that they're attending these webinars, maybe taking notes and sharing tips and ideas, especially for the leaders and executives. We mentioned a lot of different tools that you should test out. Why not have some of those employees go to those workshops and test out the tools and then deliver training or explain it to everyone else on the team? I think those are great things they could do. LinkedIn also has, I think it's like LinkedIn Learning or something like that. And some of the offerings are free. There are also a lot of Ivy League schools and Coursera that are offering courses online. So thinking about some of the skill gaps within your organization and having some of those employees go through those trainings and then train the trainer or bring back some of the information to the other employees. I think that would help them and it will help the organization afterwards.
Oh, I agree completely. And even to build upon that idea, the idea of looking into your sort of your audacious goals list, right? The things that you would want to do if and when you ever had the time to think about it, tasking somebody to say, okay, you have some time on your hands. What might this look like? What can we build upon this idea, flesh out? Is it technology we need? Is it resources? Is it money? It's a great time for people to be looking for grants applications and just doing some searches. But tasking people with things that will help us move the organizations that we lead forward after this pandemic is over.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've thought about a lot is succession planning. Most organizations don't do succession planning. They don't know what it is. They're not prepared. Risk management obviously is big. We're learning that now. And so these are areas similar to the fund development task that employees could be researching. You don't have to have a PhD to do research, especially with things such as Google. And so compiling resources and kind of organizing it in a way where moving forward, the organization will have ideas as to how it's going to move forward.
Yeah. There are a couple of chat questions that have come through the Q&A box. I just wanted to make sure that we're addressing a few of those that came through as well. So there's 2 questions regarding continuing education and online learning for staff, and what we recommend staff take, webinars related to their work or social work related online courses, since many of the conference are being canceled. I know both of us have different sort of ways our organization is handling this. I think the answer depends on what do your staff need. Are they looking for professional development, or do they need to earn their CEs, or is it a mixture of both? Just NASW-NJ conference, it's going to be 100% online and virtual, and those all offer CE courses. So I do know that some of the conferences are being canceled, but then also looking maybe outside of your sort of traditional catchment area to see what conferences might be online as well. I know this is a licensing renewal year for a lot of people throughout the country. So there might be a need to find a different venue. And I think that there are some different organizations who are stepping and able to step into that space to say our CEs are eligible for everybody across the country. Come here, and then when this crisis is over, you can go back to the place that you normally go. And so I think it depends on, at least for me, what your staff needs. Are they looking for CEs, or just looking for professional development, not just, or is it a blend of that and helping them find those resources? And then the second question, or the second part of that question, was what organizations are giving away free webinars with CEOs? Here today, we are, right? So I think there are some out there, but as any good social worker will tell you, I think it's really important to be aware of where you get your CEs from. And we know that there are a lot of fly-by-night CE organizations, and I always caution people that free CEs might not be the best way to go, that you really want to make sure that you're looking for an organization such as NASW and yourself that are providing great quality content that are available for discounted prices to members, and that you can make sure that you're getting content that's accurate and that will meet the rigor of our licensing boards. And I know in particular for my states, our licensing boards haven't let up on any of the, the regulations. We're still going to hold our community to high quality standard CEUs, and some of the fly-by-night online ones that are popping up really don't meet that rigorous test. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
I agree. I'd say a lot of the network's audience are macro practitioners, and so we don't necessarily have the same concerns or worries as it pertains to CEs. Some are licensed, but looking at basically the needs of your staff, looking at their performance plans and identified areas for growth, and really, I would split it off, honestly. So if someone needs to improve under communication or other areas, I'd have them do some general courses that may be free without CEs. But then if they need to obtain CEs, maybe someone who isn't able to do their regular job could compile resources. The network receives a lot of emails about offerings. And so I've seen a lot of questions asking, can you give us this? Can you recommend this? If you send me an email, I can share some of the things I know. But I do know that a lot of organizations are offering things for free or at a discounted rate. There are so many different nonprofit organizations that do capacity building that are currently trying to meet the needs of the workforce. You're on mute.
Of course I am. Technology fail. I was just reading the chat box and trying to catch up with a couple of people. There are some questions about ethics in COVID-19 webinars, and I just wanted to let you know we are working on one of those. We have our ethics committee, so for people who are looking specifically for an ethics during the time of COVID, we're working on that, and our ethics committee will be presenting that. Other questions, Annie, that you've seen come through that I've not been able to flag? I think we have time for one or two more, or if there's somebody who's raised their hand, I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me see. I mean, well, first, I just want to say everyone's been asking if we're going to be providing lists of these services and resources, and I do want to touch that. NASW does have a really amazing COVID-19 FAQ and resource page. Lakeya, I'm not sure if you have resources as well that you want to share, but we do have our own page that we're updating, and a recording of this webinar will be there. And I will email that link out to everyone after this is over. But if you have more resources to share or can direct people, Lakeya, I'm sure people would appreciate that.
Thank you. We're also collecting resources, so if you email me directly, I can share those.
Great. Any other questions, Annie?
I think a lot of the questions we've touched upon at some way or another. A lot of the feedback just seems to be positive, and everyone's just really appreciative that there are resources available to them during this, very unprecedented time.
Yeah. I did see a question come through from Adrian, I believe. Biggest questions that she's struggling with is working from home, and how do you differentiate between weekdays and weekend days? Lakeya, do you want to talk about that? You've been doing this much longer than us.
I almost started talking with mute. Okay. Well, for me, I am someone where I don't have children, and I work by myself. I live by myself. So I don't mind working on the weekends to complete things if I didn't get things done during the work week. That is a personal choice. For myself, staying busy allows me to keep going and not dwell on the unknown. I also mentioned I'm a doctoral student in my final semester, so a lot of the time I'm working on the weekends anyways on different projects for school. And so I think if you are someone who don't mind, go for it. But I think boundaries are important. If you're able to get done what you need to get done during your regular work week, then I think everyone should shut up if you can. But then if you can't and you don't mind and that's who you are, I think that's okay. And so it just really depends. A lot of people talk about work-life balance, and I used to say, oh, I need to work on this. But I think there's also people where they love their work, not saying those who have boundaries with work don't, but there's people where they feel more whole and they feel more balanced when everything is kind of flowing together. And I tend to be that type of person. And if that's you, I think that it's okay. And so just really, you know yourself and doing what works best for you.
Yeah, I think I also am somebody who tends to just juggle a lot of things, and will sneak into the office on a weekend if I need to catch up on a project. But I think now more than ever, and I'm sure those who are also homeschooling their children, and there's no school happening for the rest of the year, we're really having to become comfortable with this idea that work-life balance is not a thing necessarily anymore. It's more of like just a continuum of our time. And I'm trying to fit everything in where I can get 15, 20 minutes, or, after the kids go to sleep, then I can update my website, or I can tackle doing my budget. And I think that's okay right now. It's not necessarily the way I prefer to live my life all the time. But right now there aren't a lot of boundaries. And I think, if that means on the weekends at, 10 o'clock instead of probably Netflixing, which I would have loved to do, I'm, putting together a press release or doing that. Like, that's something that I'm okay with, but also checking in with your team to say, is that where you are as well? And if there's something that I need from you on a weekend, can I reach out? Or who's in charge of our social media for the weekend? And juggling off taking balance or taking those responsibilities from your team so that not everyone feels like they have to be on 24/7 in this time of crisis. Our teams have come up with a who's in charge of social media on which days so that we get a break and we get a mental sort of separation for it. But there is,
And
right,
that last point, sorry to cut you off, I was just going to say that just because we work this way, knowing that we can't expect the same for our teams and that everyone handles things differently. And just because Lakeya and Jen, want to sneak and grab the laptop and work on a press release, you can't expect other people who are going through this stuff to do the same, and being okay and open to that. One of my members, she actually emailed me and she said something that I had never really thought of. She said, "You're always kind of on the go, and now might be time for you to really just kind of allow the freedom and the space to think about other things and to relax a bit, because who knows when you're going to ever get this type of time again until you retire." And I hadn't looked at it that way. And I think having that perspective and shifting your mindset in that way, I think is helpful, especially for people who don't necessarily have the energy or motivation to work at the same level that they previously did.
Yeah, I think that's so great. You're right. We're not sure when we're going to have this time again. And speaking of time, I want to make sure that we're respectful of all of our attendees' time. It is nearing 1:30. So I just wanted to recap. Thank you all for joining us so much and the collaboration. I think this is a fun opportunity for us to come together as a social work community and different organizations to really support all of our social workers across the country, whether they be in your organization or mine. And I'm just so grateful that you joined us today and collaborated. We will make this webinar available to everyone to watch online, and we will be sending out the link to that. The CEs, give us a little bit of time. There were over 1,200 people who registered for this webinar today, so our team will be sending those out. Give us a couple of days to get that out, and we promise that you will get them. If by early next week or mid next week you don't, feel free to shoot us an email, and NASW will make sure that that's taken care of. We will share all these online resources after the fact, so we welcome you sharing this video and continuing to share your knowledge with us. And with that, I thank you all for joining us today, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.